The NPA's Investigating Directorate boss, Hermione Cronje, has resigned. Now, Cronje had been on the job for 2 years. The Investigating Directorate office was formed a few years ago to deal with the state capture cases and other high-profile matters. Cronje's exit comes against the backdrop of several matters pending in court. So what implication will this have on prosecutions? Well, let's bring in legal expert Melusi Xulu from Donda Attorneys. Melusi, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. You know, the announcement of Hermione's resignation is still very much a talking point in South Africa. And honestly speaking, it won't stop at this point. We all are trying to piece things together in as much as we've heard the official statement that it was for personal reasons, but nevertheless, we will continue to try and piece this matter together. Now, here's my attempt. Now, leading up to her resignation, there's been several unfavorable articles and this growing public discontent with the pace at which we're seeing criminal prosecutions. Could any of this that has happened really be at the heart of that decision?
The pace at which the corruption cases that she was initially appointed to tackle are not going as fast as maybe she would, that the state would have loved. Because if I would ask you if there's any case that she has finalized under her leadership, it will be very difficult to find. So I think the slow pace is concerning. And then it begs the question, maybe did these cases really have enough evidence? Because I'm of the view that if the cases were strong enough, they should have been, gone a certain length. But sometimes there are difficulties, like some witnesses are assassinated, some witnesses are overseas and so forth. So there are those challenges. But maybe I believe that she did not really have a strong team around her. Maybe there was some interference, as the reports have said, allegedly. And the budget constraints as well might be a problem.
But do you think at this point it would possibly be advisable for them to fully resource this special unit? Because if many are speaking of them not being adequately resourced, needing these specialized skills to deal with such matters, do you think it's possibly the time now, beyond her resignation, to prioritize a more decent budget?
Yes, I think so, because the initial reason for why this department was started was to look at corruption, SOEs, corruption in the security industry or cluster, and corruption also in public and private sectors. So when she started, if you check on the 24th of June 2019, there was a report that she said the recruitment will be done, the staff members will not be on a permanent basis. I think for me, that's the first problem.
Yeah.
You have a huge issue where you want to tackle corruption cases, but the people that you're appointing are not appointed on a permanent basis. So I think that was the first problem. Secondly, as you correctly stated, if there were issues with budget constraints, initially there was issues with budget constraints. We are told they were resolved, but we don't know how far they were resolved. So I think that might be a problem. But I think the most important part, I would say, Mfundo, is that we need a person, if the person is going to be the head of this department, to be 100% committed. And because obviously you will have your personal life, but you will obviously want someone that will not be distracted in how they'll tackle the cases.
And then let's talk about the pressure from citizens and even lobby groups to prosecute. Is it really warranted? Because if we speak of the beyond reasonable doubt standard for a successful conviction, it is the highest standard to meet. One would assume you can't just bring a case that isn't ripe for hearing before a judge. Otherwise, you'll have what Mogoeng once spoke out against, which is the clogging of the system, where you're effecting these arrests, and now there are several postponements for further investigations. Is it really fair to be pushing for prosecutions at all costs, or even fair on the accused themselves, who must now have this so-called cloud hanging over them for years?
Yeah. Look, when we introduced the Constitution in 93, 94, obviously in Section 35, we have a provision that says everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But it's also very important to start cases which at least have prima facie evidence that that person did that particular crime, so that you don't clog the system. So hopefully, I think what we must avoid as a nation is not to have what they call trial by media, so to speak. The prosecution must, as much as there's reports in the media, they must be able to objectively look at the evidence and say, do we have a case here or not? Because if they do that, they'll not find themselves under pressure where they'll be prosecuting the accused, but the evidence is not there. Then you'll get the head of departments not getting resources or evidence, and then they'll be resigning.
But do you not see that perhaps there's a need for better education for us ordinary citizens here? Because it doesn't stop us from applying the pressure. At this point, really, they're quite dissatisfied with the pace of prosecutions. And like you and I are saying, that here, if you must meet that reasonable doubt standard, it's too high. You cannot just expect that the justice system is really designed to deal with the truth, but rather somebody who puts the best version before the court. Do you think there's more education that is needed for the ordinary citizen to fully understand how the criminal justice system actually works?
I think that will help. But at the end of the day, the prosecution will make their decisions, and the only hope that the accused and the society can have for the truth and for justice to be done will be the courts. If the courts are able to say, look, you've got a case that has been brought here and the evidence has been heard, but it has not passed the standard that has been set, the last hope is the court. But we are hoping that the prosecution from now on towards the future, they'll be able to investigate thoroughly. Like I was thinking before I came on the show, that I hope the team that will have to investigate will be a special team through the Hawks. They have a special team with the prosecution as well to make sure that the cases that they bring, they have evidence so that they don't waste time.
And then to take you to a very interesting issue. Last month, I watched the eNCA in Parliament where they spoke of a possible shift of focus where they wanted to enter into settlements instead of that arduous criminal justice process, in some cases where companies would just pay back the money, like what we've seen with ABB paying back Eskom for overpayment and bribery matters. What is your take on such? Would it not result in a situation where the rich evades justice because they can merely pay back the money?
Yeah. I personally have a problem with that approach because it means that if you are able to afford and you're wealthy, you will be giving a benefit of a doubt, or you'll be given an option to settle, which obviously, as I said, is if we defend such accused, obviously it would be a win for us. But what about the man on the street who doesn't have that amount of money? It means the law can be manipulated, inverted commas, by the rich. So it's not going to be fair. But unfortunately, those are the options that are there for some people.
But as it stands now, Mr. Xulu, I know that we don't have sort of the legal framework that allows for this at this point. But nevertheless, that's why they went to Parliament, because they require such to formalize this and expedite the settlement of those cases. But I was nevertheless as well quite interested. I mean, I stood up listening to that they want to go this route, which would disadvantage the ordinary man if you're not into white-collar crime. You go and do the time and the others don't. And the other part was that the eNCA said they wanted to focus on crime that instills some sort of fear in communities, such as housebreakings. Good and well, it does instill fear. But one would think that cleaning out Eskom has a profound impact on me too, where, as it stands, we have never-ending tariff hikes. Our taxes are high because we must constantly bail out these SOEs. Our quality of life is somewhat compromised. Do you think that we only have to focus on what is considered to be the crimes that instill fear?
I think we must focus on all crimes. You know, for example, there's a case of a certain CFO, which I believe in Germany, because the company was also involved in Germany. They started some prosecutions there, but in South Africa, where the monies were taken in a wrong manner, it hasn't started. In fact, I'll even state that I believe the company that he worked with, this is a very strange thing that happens, very ironic. The company that he worked with gave money to the NPA to assist them with investigation against their employees.
Yes, yes.
So it means the rich will get a leeway, but what about the poor man on the street? So we must all be equal. Unfortunately, as George Orwell said in Animal Farm, some equals are more equal than others, but we must avoid the situation.
But is it perhaps not speaking to a broader issue here that was once spoken of before, the previous administration, when we spoke of a hollowing out of some of these institutions, where there's probably no capacity within the NPA to speak of at this point? That here, if you're going to do cases such as that of Steinhoff, you need certain expertise, and most of those people have moved to the private sector because really the NPA doesn't pay all that much. So what happens or what becomes of that when many people are not willing to give of their time and work for the NPA, where you have a threshold, you can't get a certain salary as great as that you would get in the private sector?
I won't lie, it's interesting to work at the NPA. I once worked there myself, but I think what is important, we must look at the interest of the society. If it's in the interest of the society to give NPA a proper budget for them to do the work, I think that must be done, so that we don't have situations where there will be certain favors given to other criminals, so to speak, because we don't have enough budgets. So maybe what the leaders in the government and the leaders in the justice system have to talk about is NPA well funded, or is NPA specialized enough to do certain specialized crimes? And if not, we need leadership in this situation.
And then just finally, in closing, we know that the NPA is calling to be independent of the Justice Ministry. All good and well. Many have called for that, especially because many have been talking of this NPA being open to abuse before. What's your take on that?
I think them being independent is a good thing. But I think the most important thing is, what is the vision of the NPA? And once the vision is clear enough, they must be given the resources that they need to do their job independently.
And then with that, I suspected you would actually say they should be independent. But now they're saying they want to be similar to any other Chapter 9 institution. But if we had to talk Chapter 9 institutions, we're seeing what's happening with Busisiwe Mkhwebane right now, where many accuse her of doing someone else's bidding or a faction within the ANC. Not that it's true or anything, we do not know, but nevertheless, there are those accusations. And what really that means is that clearly some are of the view that the administration of the day can influence the head of even a Chapter 9 institution. So who's to say if they move the route of being independent as a Chapter 9 institution, there would be no allegations or accusations even with that NPA?
I think our best hope is to have leadership that has integrity within NPA. Hopefully it's there, hopefully it will be improved, because there's a Latin term which states if it's translated into English, who will guide the guards, who will guide those people who are supposed to guide us as well. So we wish to have the leadership that would have integrity, so that even if they are independent, they will not be influenced by anyone, because what we will wish not to happen in our society is a situation where a government institution can be used by certain factions to drive certain agendas, and we will not have an independent NPA or any government institution. So we do not want to be in those situations where factional battles are fought through NPA or any such
Mr.
institution.
Xulu, thank you very much for your time. That's Melusi Xulu from Donda Attorneys speaking to us there on the resignation of Hermione Cronje.